Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. Hare Krishna. You are the temple president.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for coming. Actually, Kaunteya Prabhu is the senior disciple of the first I saw Prabhu was maybe 18 years ago when upstairs you did a seminar on cognition development. That's the first time I remember it. It was very young brahmachari and very impressed by the presentation. And ever since that, he has been traveling and actually as part of at least the co-minister of the ISKCON Congregational Development Ministry, as a member of the GBC Strategic Planning Team and the co-chair of the GBC Organization Development Planning Team. He's from Italy and was introduced to ISKCON in 1960 and initiated in 1981. He is a PhD in Indo-Vedic psychology. And he's right now, though he and his wife travel a lot, but they are actually residents of my hometown. So that way we have a Vasi doing this wonderful presentation. And actually this presentation, my husband, when he had gone for GBC college, he said that we did the presentation and he was so appreciative when he came back. Actually, he would say, this is one presentation, if we ever get Kaunteya Prabhu to Chicago, we should ask him to do it. And I'm so glad that today we got this opportunity. So thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Okay, do we have some questions for everyone, or somebody likes a chair? Would you like the chair? Anybody prefers a chair?
Prabhu also writes books and the table there, there are different books that he's written.
Me or my wife or other people?
Yeah, his wife too, Shraddha Prabhu, and we think devotees too. So after the class, we want to stop by the table and see. Sure, it will catch your interest.
Thank you. So, up to what time we go?
We can go till
8:30. Okay. So generally at the GBC College we spent 3-4 hours on this. And so we practice these topics. Here, of course, it won't be all this time. So we'll do the presentation. We'll take some questions. And there will be many concepts being presented in the short time. I don't know if some of you like to take notes, or I'll leave the PowerPoint to the temple as a reference. So these are the title. Samanvaya, reconciling apparent contradictions, and the aims are to help participants see that mishandling philosophical disputes can seriously turn apart our movement, our communities. To help participants realize that it's often not the conflict itself, but how we handle the conflict, how much emotional and ego energy we invest in the issues. To help participants realize that Srila Prabhupada did indeed say different things at different times, and we need to reconcile the apparent contradictions. To help participants realize the need for not taking strong positions without first having studied deeply the subject. And to help participants find ways to deal with conflict in a mature, wise, productive way for the health of the movement, avoiding irresponsibly taking positions that are uninformed. Okay, so this is the official title, Samanvaya, Reconciling Apparent Contradictions. Sometimes we do lock horns on different themes, range from the social to the theological or to the practical. We start taking positions on a theoretical platform, and then we become more involved emotionally. Jai Shri Kishore Kishore Ki Jai. And then we become more and more involved in the conflict. Like, some reason is that Srila Prabhupada did say apparently different thing in different cases, like here about the origin of the jiva, the conclusions that no one falls from the spiritual world of Vaikuntha planet, for it is the eternal abode, that's third canto. But sometimes he speaks like in this lecture in Bombay. So when we fall down from the spiritual world, it's part and parcel, we are in the spiritual, our position in the spiritual world, but when we fall down within this material world, we fall down in such way. So this is one of the examples of different statements according to which devotees polarize themselves. Some they lean more towards one side of the screen, others lean more to the other side of the screen. Or varnashram. The varnashram system is for convenience sake in the material world. It has nothing to do with spiritual life. Always remember that varnashram life is a good program for material life and it helps one in spiritual life, but spiritual life is not dependent upon it. So some people take this type of quotes and say, well, this is a bhakti movement, you should not absorb too much in these external considerations. At the same time, Srila Prabhupada also said the varnashram dharma mentioned here is essential for human civilization. So some people dedicate very much to that mission of establishing their version of varnashram. A woman real business is to look after household affairs, keep everything neat and clean, and if there is sufficient milk supply available, she should always be engaged in churning butter. Making yogurt, curd, so many nice varieties simply from milk. The woman should be cleaning, sewing, like that. Then, just next year, he wrote another letter. Our main business is to distribute books. So far as the women distributors who have left New York and Boston temples and have gone to New Vrindavan, they should return immediately and resume their original service. In Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, everyone is a preacher. Whether man or woman, it doesn't matter. Everyone should go out. So, there are devotees who tend to gravitate more towards one side, others towards the other side, or say centralization. Letter to Karandara, do not centralize anything. Then just less than a month later, Srila Prabhupada wrote to Damodar, for reasons of spreading Krishna consciousness movement, we may sometimes centralize. Just like the books and money for BBT are managed by Karandara in Los Angeles. Okay, more on women. I'm always thinking of your new Vrindavan. The first thing is that whether the girls and women who live there are agreeable to work as I've suggested, namely to take care of the children, to keep the whole temple, kitchen clean, etc., cooking, churning butter. Then, these Siddhantic conclusions are being mentioned in all my books. And the boys and girls in our Krishna society should now give more attention for studying the books very attentively. I hope in Washington Center you will have all the boys and girls to follow this method, because henceforward we will have to face many scholars and philosophers to stabilize our Krishna consciousness movement. So, less than 1 year later. So, of course, this introduced also the concept of context. One letter was about New Vrindavan, a rural community. Another letter was about Washington, the capital of the country. So obviously the services would be different. You preach to a lawyer, a lady, so being a criminal case lawyer last 20 years here in Chicago. You tell her that she should give up her profession and start churning butter. She may not feel that inspired. So then, but if you have, say, a nice lady from Rajasthan that she's already churning butter, and you may want to tell her that, okay, you churn the butter, then you offer the butter to Krishna. So it may be more natural, more easy. Otherwise, what we risk to do is manifest this saying that says, the operation was successful, but the patient died. You're all familiar with that. In other words, we may say, no, I'm being completely as it is. I just expressed Srila Prabhupada's words as they are in a particular letter, in a particular conversation, or in a particular book. Unfortunately, the person couldn't get it and never came back again, but I did my duty. I just said what Prabhupada said. So, there are many types of Prabhupada said. Some Prabhupada said, from our perspective, we could be citing Prabhupada in the mode of Sattva Guna, in the mode of Raja Guna, or the mode of Tamaguna, in goodness, passion, and ignorance. Of course, Prabhupada statements are beyond the gunas, but the way we filter them, we select them, we utilize them, may not be according to transcendence. So, for instance, leather. Regarding your seeking permission for selling some leather goods and water pipes, I say, yes, you can sell. Now, in Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Srila Prabhupada says, somebody asks Srila Prabhupada, Swamiji, is wearing of leather shoes permissible? No, leather means violence. Or equal rights. However, the woman may claim equal rights, they're under the control of the men. We keep women separately from men, that's all. Otherwise, the rights are the same. So, we could go on many different topics, actually. So, sometimes we end up throwing these shlokas or these verses at each other, and it becomes the snowball fights with quotes. So I throw one at you, you throw one at me. And then everybody starts creating some teams. We believe this, we believe that, and we start throwing. Then everybody starts throwing at everybody else. It becomes quite confusing, it becomes quite chaotic, and it becomes quite disturbed. And like these two deers, they are throwing at each other. You see, boom, 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 boom. At one point, this deer puts up the white flag, but that never happens in philosophical disputes. Nobody ever says, oh, yeah, you defeated me, your arguments are better. It just doesn't happen. So then we end up gliding down, both individually and collectively, in this conflict. So the point is that we try to hit the other person or the other party, the other views, and we try to defeat the person. Instead, it should be a research that is based more on finding common ground, finding a mutual understanding, should be based in finding the truth, not winning an argument. So sometimes we do like a big battles. Somebody use a quote, Prabhupada said this and Prabhupada said that, and it's true, Prabhupada said those things. It's a fact that Prabhupada said those things. But sometimes we forget the context, we forget the recipient, we forget the time, and so we take them separately from the context in which they were expressed, and we become enemies. We become enemies because, again, these are spiritual matters. They're divine, they're sacred, and so we become really upset when somebody disagrees with us. So, Srila Prabhupada wrote in a letter, we are preaching Krishna consciousness, the greatest platform of harmony, and if we dissent among ourselves and disunite, it does not look very well. We are preaching peace, we are preaching harmony, and if people come and they get closer to the movement and see that in certain areas there's no harmony, then people feel what these people are talking about. They have a Bhagavad Gita, there is a peace formula, 529 and so on, but somehow among themselves there's a lot of tension, a lot of conflict. Srila Prabhupada also says, material nature means dissension and disagreement, especially in this Kali Yuga. But for this Krishna consciousness movement, its success will depend on agreement. Even though there are varieties of engagements. In the material world, there are varieties. There is no agreement. In the spiritual world, there are varieties, but there is agreement. So, the success of the Krishna consciousness movement will depend on agreement. Now, Srila Prabhupada also says, it's not utopian. We cannot just, in a starry-eyed way, thinking that we'll all agree. Srila Prabhupada also say, we are people, we are individuals, we see things in different ways, this is natural, so there will be disagreements. At the same time, again, there is a way of dealing with disagreement which actually builds a relation, and a way of dealing with disagreement that destroys the relation. And it depends a lot on how we handle the disagreement. Even in the material world, experts explain that is not really the issue very often. It's not the issue in itself, but it's how the issue is handled. Like in this country, there is a lot of road rage. People have a little accident sometime, they don't know each other, they just had a little accident, then they come out of the car, they take the gun, and they shoot at each other. And it's a traditional way of dealing with conflict. In some areas of this country, at least, it's really a classic legal term, road rage. And sometimes it's not a big accident, nobody got hurt. It's just that people are frustrated and there's so much tension, so it blows up in that way. Now, a little theory. In Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada explains, merely trying to defeat one's opponent is called vitanda, but the actual conclusion is called vada. This conclusive truth is a representation of Krishna. Krishna says, I am vada. I am the conclusion of an argument. But often, we are not looking for a conclusion or mutually accepted understanding. We are looking for defeating the other person. So let's read from Surrender to Me by Burijan Prabhu. Vada is debate carried out fairly according to standard rules, without trying to force the establishment of a particular conclusion. Vitanda is quibbling or merely destructive argument in which one tries to defeat the opponent by any means possible, but does nothing substantial to positively prove one's own thesis. For instance, defeat the opponents by any means possible. You can attack the sincerity or the morality, the ethics of your opponent. Or you can give the opponent bad names, characterize them in a ridiculous way. You can make fun of them, which it doesn't really support your point, but it destroys the image of the other person. Jalpa, using various deceptive means to fool the opposition, is unfair argument. Vitanda and Jalpa are forms of argument in which winning, not necessarily determining the truth, is the main consideration. So the title of this presentation was How to Deal with Conflict. So one of the main answers to the question is, it's a question of attitude. It's a question of attitude. Approach the issues with patience. Approach the issue with humility. We may not have the full picture. We may have only a partial idea of all what Srila Prabhupada said. We might be attached to a certain aspects of his teachings, but sometimes we may forget other aspects, or we may never have heard about other aspects. I give an example. Sometimes devotees quote Srila Prabhupada said talking about democracy, the democratic system of government, the democratic systems of voting people's representative to a position. So he used the expression, demon crazy. How many of you heard this expression? You didn't hear? Okay. He did use that expression, demon crazy. In other words, he basically explained that you have many unqualified people, and then how can they vote the right people? They vote according to their very limited knowledge, very limited values, like that. At the same time, in other cases, it did glorify democracy as a system, as a good system. No, like he wrote to an American leader. He said, in this country, you have this good system of democracy. So if enough people become Krishna conscious, you can elect actually Krishna conscious people to the government. Like that. But if we lock ourselves only in one area of what Srila Prabhupada said, we won't have the full picture. It's just like if I ask you about the Atlantic Ocean. Is the Atlantic Ocean cold or warm? What would you say? Depends. Depends on what? Yes? Yes, what? Yes? Time, place, and circumstances. Yes? Time, of course, some seasons is colder, some place is colder, some circumstances colder. Yeah, if you go and take a bath up in Canada, Halifax, maybe very cold. If you go and take bath in Rio de Janeiro or in West Africa, it's quite warm. So you can't really say if the Atlantic Ocean is cold or warm. It depends where you experience it. Similarly, Srila Prabhupada's teachings are quite oceanic. He spoke on thousands of subjects with thousands of people in thousands of circumstances, sometimes privately, sometimes publicly. And again, you cannot just box Srila Prabhupada in a limited label. Was he conservative? Was he a liberal? Was he an innovator? Was he a traditionalist? He was all of this and more. So there are different statements. which sometimes we tend to gravitate towards, but there are other statements often. Especially when we talk about, we could say, relative things. Relative in the sense that they're not standing by themselves, like theological truths. Srila Prabhupada never said something different like Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he constantly said. Or things like chanting the holy names of Krishna are the ways for getting self-realization in this age. Many other things, you will never find something different. But when we come to the social, when we come to the management of the movement, he did say different things at different times. And unless we understand the context, the interlocutors, we may get confused. So, just like a pharmacy, like this pharmacy in India, there are many medicines, and all of them are hopefully authorized by the government, the Ministry of Health. So Srila Prabhupada said, in a drugstore there may be many medicines and all may be genuine. What's required is that an experienced physician prescribe medicine for a particular patient. We cannot say in this case, this is also medicine and this is also medicine. No. The medicine which is effective for a particular person is the medicine for him. Phalena pariciyate. Phalena pariciyate is a Vedic saying. Phalena, by the fruit, pariciyate. You examine or you judge, you test. Phalena pariciyate vriksha. You judge a tree by its result, by its fruit. This is an apple tree, this is a banana tree. So similarly, Srila Prabhupada is interested in results. So we are presenting Krishna consciousness, and some aspects are more relevant for somebody, and other aspects are more relevant for somebody else in terms of practical application. So we need to take Srila Prabhupada's the whole body of information, the whole body of messages. Otherwise, we become like the proverbial blind man and the elephants. I think you have all heard about the story. There was this elephant, very big, and this blind man, or blindfolded at least, but they were trying to understand what's an elephant, and somebody was saying, grabbing a leg, yeah, the elephant is like a tree, it's like a tree trunk. Somebody was touching the body. No, what are you saying? The elephant is like a wall. Somebody was touching the ear and say, no, it's not like a wall, it's more like a big banana leaf. So everybody had a very limited perception, but they thought that they had the full perception of the elephant. So similarly with Srila Prabhupada's teaching, sometimes it's the same. Sometimes people feel, no, Srila Prabhupada wants this. No, Srila Prabhupada wants that. No, Srila Prabhupada wants the other thing. The point is that Srila Prabhupada wants so many things. Srila Prabhupada wants so many things. He wants centers in the countryside, farms. He wants centers in the city. He wants deity worship. He wants scientific broadcasting of Krishna consciousness. He wants so many things. So, just to give an example from history, this is a painting of the Council of Trent. Trent is a city in North Italy. The Council of Trent, the Catholic Church discussing for 18 years in the 16th century. What happened in the 16th century? There was the Reformation by Martin Luther, and he challenged some of the tenets of the Catholic Church. Before Martin Luther, there was only the Catholic Church, was the only Christian organization established in Europe. But after Martin Luther, the Reformation, Protestantism, the Catholics had to discuss. Do we agree? We don't agree. So they took their time, and different bishops, scholars, they came together, and for 18 years they were discussing all these things. So the point is, sometimes it takes time to discuss, to delve deeply into the issues, to see pros and cons. It's not like a fast food type of culture. You go there like a drive-through or something like that. Things need discussions, need profound meditation, it needs prayer, like that. So, otherwise the risk is Arda Kukuti Nyaya, which means I accept things which are very favorable to my understanding and other things I reject. This is called Arda Kukuti Nyaya, the logic of the half hen, the logic of the half chicken. Many of you know the story. There was this chicken, there was a non-vegetarian farmer who had a chicken. And this chicken was producing eggs. So he was very happy because he would sell the eggs on the market, he would make money. But the point is that he started studying the chicken. Oh, from the back side, the egg comes. But from the front side, I had to feed this chicken. And that cost money. I had to provide grains. So he had this brilliant idea. Let me cut the chicken in half. So I'll just keep the back part, so I'll keep getting eggs. But I cut the head off so I don't have to feed anymore. And obviously, guess what happened? The chicken died. And he lost the eggs. So similarly, sometimes, Ardha Kukuti Nyaya, we take only half. Sometimes we know that there are other aspects, but we don't want to acknowledge them. We hope and pray that the other party doesn't find that quote that we know exists. So, Samanvaya, this is essential. Samanvaya means reconciling apparent contradictions. Samanvaya literally means full knowledge. Means harmonizing all the statements. And it's very much of part of our tradition. We find this word even in the Vedanta Sutra. Reconciling apparently contradictory statements is the Vaishnava exegesis, scriptural interpretation. See, the Mayavadis, what they do to try to support their idea is they unauthorizedly divide all the scriptures into two different levels of truth. They say when there is something that sounds like impersonal, they say this is paramarthik. Paramarthik means really real. Then there is something that doesn't sound so impersonalist, speaks about forms, transcendental names, and so on, diversity. They say this is vyavaharik. It's not really real. It's conventionally real. Now, that type of interpretation is not Vedic. In Vedic interpretation, the Vedic study of the scripture is Samanvaya. You need to take all of them and somehow harmonize how they work all together. And it takes effort. So the Mayavadi approach divides all statements into Paramarthik and Vyavaharik. Vedanta Sutra, the first 4 verses, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. First aphorism says, now it's time to inquire into the absolute truth. Then one may ask, so what is this absolute truth? Vajjhamma dhyasya yataha. The absolute truth is He from whom creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe proceeds. And then one may ask, so how do I know that absolute truth? Shastra yunitvat you got to go through Shastra. You cannot go through logic only or through sense perception. You got to go through the revealed knowledge. Okay, but then the next question is, well, the Shastra says so many things. There's so many Shastras and so many teachers of Shastra. So then the Vedanta Sutra says, Tattu Samanvayat. You have to do the Samanvaya. You have to harmonize the statement. You have to reconcile these statements, how they work all together, although they apparently contradict each other. So George Bernard Shaw, playwright, he wrote, the moment we want to believe something, we suddenly see all the arguments for it and become blind to the arguments against it. So human beings are emotional beings, very emotional, more emotional than rational. And so we tend to invest a lot of sentiments, of feelings in our thinking. So we become attached, especially when we proclaim this thinking publicly. I believe this. Then it's very hard for our ego to step back and say, no, actually I was wrong, or, well, there was something more, or there was something more complete. So there is something called polarity management. There are different polarities, like the North Pole, the South Pole. There are two opposites. But we need to manage them. We can't just say this pole is good, the other is bad. There's pros and cons. So polarity management, like I gave an example, one may like individualism and one may like team play. So as you can see, there is a plus at the top and there is a minus at the bottom, both for individualism and for team play. There's a plus and there's a bottom. Now, without going to the whole list, you can take a look. But the idea is that, yes, there are advantages in individualism. It gives you more freedom to take different initiatives and so on. But there are also dangers or challenges. Similarly to team play, teamwork, there are some pluses, but there are also some minuses. So, polarity management means we see what we like for what it is a polarity. It has pluses or it has minuses. So the idea is we tend to lean towards one pole or the other. We tend to be overly, if not exclusively, focused on the positive aspects of our preferred pole and on the negative aspects of the other pole. Power struggle ensues to make one pole prevail. The irony, should either pole win, it could seriously damage the organization. Especially in our case, ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, in terms of practical application of the philosophy, there is room for many different approaches. Srila Prabhupada encouraged different types of preaching, different types of spreading the movement according to different places, according to different circumstances. He tried different things. So there's just no need to polarize ourselves that this is the only way. There are different ways, and many of these ways are good, are bona fide, are authorized. So tremendous breakthrough can occur when we see the polarity for what it is. We need to recognize the other person's views that are also bona fide, and there are also advantageous in certain ways. And we also need to see that our views also sometimes have some danger or some risk or maybe some weakness. So understanding begins when we can openly acknowledge the potential downside to my pole and express appreciation for the positive aspects of the other pole. Like say, for instance, simple, generally is not a controversy, but imagine there is someone who is developing a farm community working for self-sufficiency, producing food, producing clothing, and so on. And he starts saying, oh, while you are in the city, in Chicago, Srila Prabhupada wanted self-sufficiency. And then the Chicago temple may say, no, 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 why you're wasting time in the countryside? Srila Prabhupada wanted to preach where there are millions of people. So we should be in the cities, like that. So this is actually would be a frivolous argument because Srila Prabhupada wanted both. Certainly, Srila Prabhupada wanted centers in cities where there's a lot of people, so we can approach them. And certainly, Srila Prabhupada also wanted us to give examples of self-sufficient communities. So although they are different, there's no contradiction actually. We can then come to appreciate each other's contribution to a healthy polarity. Like even in the material world, there are contradictory sayings. Each has wisdom inside, but needs its complementary opposite. Some of you are familiar with this. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, but is also said out of sight, out of mind. Both are true, but both actually kind of neutralize each other. The pen is mightier than the sword, but actions speak louder than words. Great minds think alike, and fools seldom differ. Or birds of a feather flock together, and opposites attract. Many hands make light work, but too many cooks spoil the broth. So these are popular wisdom sayings, but they're only partially true. They're not absolute truth. So this is, we call it the tyranny of the or. In other words, it's like a demon that forces us to think. Either it's this or that. Either it's this or that. But, so, we can only have change or stability. Either we change, we innovate, we transform, or stability. We do the same thing, tradition, orthodoxy, and so on. This is a very limiting type of mentality, either or. So what we need to solve our conflicts, to manage our conflicts or polarities, is the genius of the end. Instead of choosing between A or B, we could have both A and B. And that takes a little experience, a little expertise. Otherwise, we clash, and spiritual leaders should become instruments of harmony, not of unnecessary polarization. Unnecessary polarization means sometimes there are certain things which are obviously wrong, and we should take a stand. But sometimes the tension is not necessary, and we should diffuse the tension instead of escalate it. So this is an example from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the case of Ashwatthama. This is Ashwatthama who had killed the sons of Draupadi. This is Draupadi. In the night, at the end of the battle of Kurukshetra, so Arjuna had vowed to kill him, and then the whole discussion ensues. Bhima also was very much into killing him, but then there was a whole argument. You can find it in the 7th chapter of the 1st canto. King Yudhishthira fully supported the statements of the queen, Nakula and Sahadeva, the younger brothers of the king, and also Satyaki, Arjuna, the personality of God, the Lord Shri Krishna, son of Devaki, and the ladies and others all unanimously agreed with the king. Bhima, however, disagreed with them and recommended killing this culprit. And as most of you know, Krishna inspired Arjuna to find the solution, and Arjuna cut the natural gem that Ashwatthama had on his head. So it was kind of socially killing him, but not physically killing him. He found a solution, and he found a very satisfactory exit from that circumstance. So the conclusion: openly acknowledge the potential downside of your pole. It's the conclusion of this section on polarity. We need to acknowledge that our position may have some danger, potential downside, and appreciate the positive aspects of the other pole. Bertrand Russell, philosopher, mathematician, he said, the whole problem with the world is the fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts. Sometimes people were not very learned or very patient, or not very scholarly. They take a position, they're very sure of that position, they're ready to fight, to promote it. They call bad names those who don't agree. And sometimes wiser people, they're a little more cautious, a little more patient, a little more open. So sometimes those who are less wise make a lot of noise. So this is a great sage. His name is Brajbihari Prabhu. And this is from an email that he wrote. The biggest challenge to clear thinking, in my humble opinion, is when we have a preconceived notion of what we want to prove, and then choose which parts of Shastra, Srila Prabhupada's statements to present or emphasize, while often neglecting or prematurely writing off other statements. So Brajbihari Prabhu, many of you know, is very expert. He has been studying conflict resolution for many years. He has been teaching conflict resolution for many years. And he's actually working for the American government to help different conflicts. And he's very high actually as a very high post because of his expertise. So he is also the director of the office called ISKCON Resolve, that provides mediation, provides training, and very often very controversial issues end up on his lap or on his table, on his plate, whatever image you want to use. So he had a lot of meditation on this. So he says the biggest challenge is when we have a preconceived notion. We already approach the dialogue, the discussion, the debate with the conclusion. We already take a position. This is what I believe, this is the truth, this is the best. So because we take this preconceived notion as our position, then what happens? We pick and choose from the Shastra, Srila Prabhupada, or whatever evidence we can find just to support our idea. And we neglect or disregard or try to delegitimize other statements. So he continues. So the key hermeneutical principle in ISKCON to me is dispassionate, thorough research, allowing the statements to speak for themselves. We certainly have our opinions, but we set them aside and instead look at the entirety of Shastric or Srila Prabhupada statements. We can argue in foreseeing the body of text this way or that way, but the argument should be a creative one rather than an attached one, where we are willing to have our mind changed if more logical and Krishna-conscious points are presented by others. So, dispassionate and thorough research. Dispassionate means detached. Dispassionate means devoid of passion, devoid of attachment, devoid of taking a strong position. So there is no quick fix, but this is the important attitude. When there is some tension, we should become a little cautious and say, okay, let's study things a little more deeper. Let's understand. Let's start understanding also that other devotees are also sincere. They also want to understand the truth. They also want to please the Lord. And let's not get into like personal attacks like that. So on this platform, he calls it willing to have our mind changed. In other words, we present our opinion, but in a tentative way, not like a final thing. We present our opinions in a vulnerable frame of mind. Say, look, this is my understanding, but what do you think? I actually have some other material that I'd like to share. I have a file at the GBC College. We ask the participants to read it. It's 20 pages. It's from a book some of you may have heard about, The Fifth Discipline. It's a book famous for people who are into management and things. So this book explains that there is this concept of team learning. Team learning, and these 20 pages explain, both theoretically and practically, when a team can learn better when they approach a discussion not like a debate, we should do like this, we should do like that, or this is the truth, but like a dialogue. And people present ideas, but open for those ideas to take a different shape, to be shaped by the dialogue, shaped by the evidence. So this is, in one sense, is the most important attitude. And the point in our disagreements is that we need to distinguish between principles and details. In other words, in philosophy or in theology or in Krishna consciousness, there are principles. Like, for instance, a principle is to chant the holy names. Chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, another principle for an initiated devotee is to chant the Maha Mantra 16 rounds. That's a principle. Now, a detail is, how do you chant? You chant sitting, you chant walking, you chant at this time, you chant at that time. How do you dress when you chant? Those are details. The principle remains the chanting, the principle remains 16 rounds. How that principle is applied may be a detail. It's not essential. So there was this little story from the book by Burijan Prabhu, My Glorious Master, about Srila Prabhupada's teachings. Srutakirti, as he moved to massage Prabhupada's side, asked, Prabhupada, how can we tell the difference between making an adjustment and changing a principle? Prabhupada's eyes closed and Shrutakirti continued to massage. After a few moments, Prabhupada opened his eyes and said, that takes a little intelligence. In other words, what's a principle and what's a detail is not always obvious. We don't have a huge list somewhere. These are all principles. So, A, B, C, D, and these are details. A, B, C, D. We don't have that list. So it takes a little intelligence, it takes a little discrimination to recognize. If we have developed our spiritual intelligence, we can make distinctions between principles and details, but we should confirm our opinions with trusted friends or superiors. Okay, so this is the end of the presentation, and we have some time for questions. Yes? Do we need a mic?
It's okay, I can speak loudly. Prabhu, I have two questions. The first one is, on the slide that you were putting and the build up to that slide also about having A or B, and sometimes there's a simple answer of A and B. I feel from my little experience that we are unfortunately most of the times in a very resource constrained place when we are serving within ISKCON, primarily manpower resource constraints. And so much of the conflict is not about this or that, because of the content of this or that, but more about having to choose because we have only X number of manpower.
So what's the question?
So how to understand that in the context of what you have presented?
Uh-huh. Generally, this, we could say, practical things are not so emotionally involving. In other words, of course, we may have different ideas. We should do this, we should do that. We have this number of devotees, or we have this much resources. And at one point, there is a decisional process. Either the group or temple president, some other officer decides. And generally, if there is a good relation among devotees, that things are understood why a decision is taken, or especially if there is communication. When there are theological or socio-theological issues, those are more subtle. And so those are potentially more explosive, because there's like a theory, there is a lifestyle, or there is a worldview which is at stake. Generally, when we are in a temple and we have some disagreement, practical disagreement, doesn't challenge our sense of identity. You like to give an example, for instance, of such disagreements?
I missed your point, but somebody was
Okay.
talking, so
You made a good point, like the point that you were saying is if the relationships are good. Sometimes relationships don't start so strong and it takes a long time to build up, and when these practical decisions are made, they are misconceived to be laying importance on A versus B.
But can you give
And
me an
then that
example?
becomes explosive.
Can you give me an example to help me understand what kind of decision? Because you might have you must have something in mind which I'm not aware of.
I'm not sure I want to share that in an open
Okay,
forum.
okay. It's a fact. See, relational issues, relational difficulties are there in every circumstance. There is within the family, within the country, within the couple, married couple, within brothers and sisters, especially in this age. Kali Yuga is the age of conflict. So naturally there are conflicts also within an ashram. Some of us are naturally more compatible, more understanding among each other. Some of us may come from common background, and so we relate to way of talking, way of thinking. Some of us may come from quite different background, from different continents, from different races. So sometimes there is difficulty. And even if one comes from the same place, from the same language, from the same education and so on. Still, there are misunderstandings, but those are not really a province exclusive to Krishna consciousness. That's in any relation within non-profit organization, for-profit organization, governmental organizations. Every time you put some human beings together, there will be tensions because we are different, we see things differently, and naturally we make different conclusions. That's human nature.
I have a second question, may I ask?
Sure.
So, as a younger devotee within the movement, some years back I heard about, as a society we can't come to a conclusion about whether one should eat chocolate or not eat chocolate. And it was entertaining for a while, but then, it's on some level understandable and it settles within the system. Okay, it's a detail. But more recently, it came to my attention that different spiritual masters train or encourage different practices of what our initiation vows are, particularly on the illicit sex topic. And how am I supposed to understand that? As an institution where, the basis of it is these principles, and if the spiritual masters are not encouraging necessarily following in the same fashion.
So the question is?
How should I perceive this cooperation or lack of, or the inability to come to some conclusion of senior disciples, these devotees within the movement?
Well, as I gave the example of the Catholic Church, when they had some challenge or some questions, they took their time and they discussed. So, like for instance, you have also other religious groups like the Amish, and they have certain principles, and when there is a new technology, at that time was maybe electricity, then it was cars, then it was telephones. So in each community, because even Amish have different communities, they took the time, the elders sat down, studied the Bible, discussed, should we have electricity in our houses? Should we use cars? Should we use telephones? And they discussed, and then they came to some conclusion. But they took their time. In other words, not like the first thing, okay, let's use it. No, they took their time. So the issue with chocolate or with a more clear definition of what constitutes illicit sex, it may take time. It may take effort. And of course, if as a movement we don't put this time and effort, people will have to come to some conclusions because these are relevant issues. There is so much chocolate in the world, and there is so much sexual attraction in the world. So different spiritual leaders, different spiritual guides will have to come to some conclusion. So as a movement, we are still a young movement. We are just turned 51, which is very, very young for a spiritual movement. And it's a fact, we have not taken the time as a movement to establish a clear, common, universal policy. And so these are symptoms of a young movement. At one point, I would suggest that we'll have to sit down, the scholars, the people of experience, men and women of sincerity, honesty, and scriptural knowledge, and then come to some conclusion. But of course, if we don't do this work, life goes on. People have to decide some way or another. So I see a few hands. I think I saw first your hand, then your hand, then your hand, then your hand, and then your hand. So we have a conflict on our hands. No, I think we can cover. I think we'll. Oh, you got. He concedes.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, the Catholic Church has been deliberating a lot of issues within the Church. 3rd century, 5th century, Council of Trent lasted for 60 years, 3 popes deliberating from 1531 to 1590. And lately have been a lot of changes, reform, counter-reform, now all what has happened. But it seems like it is a solid, anyway, church. Yes, you said we are a young movement, but every time something happens within our movement, devotees get out of the movement and start talking against their god brothers and sisters, and one see in the YouTube and social media the most horrendous things that comes from devotees that is misleading, is just appalling. No, not that personally I get affected. I get affected because I take it personally, you know, but it's horrendous that people that were
Do you have a question or is it a general comment?
No, it's both. Actually, I'm
Okay.
sorry. It's a little bit of both. It is terrible that how the movement has addressed those guys that have gone, and how we take it, how you guys can protect us in a way.
You guys,
the ones
who?
that are coming, that are newcomers, interlopers, so to speak, into the movement, and not get affected or get influenced by those who are coming out from the movement and talking, inclusive disciples of Srila Prabhupada, like the Rigriks, for instance.
Okay. So the basic answer is, of course, that there are 3 gunas: sattva, rajas, and tamas, goodness, passion, and ignorance. So we act sometimes in different ways. Goodness maintains good relation, maintains a positive outlook, maintains harmony. Passion is more interested in personal interest, personal aggrandizement, personal gain. And ignorance tends to be destructive. So some of the people, they move towards tamaguna in the sense of often they come from that social or life experience. And some of them also, they have quite negative experiences. We cannot just deny those experiences, it's a fact. And so they lose the interest of protecting the movement, they lose the vision of the whole, or they lose the interest in the mission, they become covered, or for a number of reasons, they start becoming frustrated, they start becoming angry, and so they unleash this anger in many ways. It could be a YouTube video, it could be an article, it could be word by word, means word of mouth. So, yes, there are critics, there are people who have developed this, I would say, destructive attitudes. And so I would say that, again, the solution must be systemic. It's not a quick fix. We should be careful whom we recruit, because if we recruit only or prominently people who have already a lot of problems, they will create problems, both when they are inside and when they are outside. So we should see whom we recruit, whom we attract. Are we attracting problem cases? Are we attracting people who are balanced, educated, intelligent, sober? So that's first thing. Second, how we treat these people. Because if we treat them nicely, there is much more chances they will remain nice, even if they may not be able to follow everything all their life. So we should, in this process, we should also make a self-analysis, a collective self-analysis. And there are people who have negative experiences. It's a fact. So prevention is better than cure, more than how to stop them or how to this or that, how to somewhat mitigate these feelings they have. The best thing would be to prevent, no? For instance, instead of forcing people, join the movement, join the ashram, give up everything, give us all your money, give up this, give up that, and then people under pressure, they do that, but then they become frustrated because was not organic, was not holistic, was not wholesome, they were not mature, then they feel betrayed. I'm just giving one example. There could be many examples. As I said before, we are a young movement, and it's a fact that we have done mistakes of immaturity, and it's a fact that as a result, some of our previous members have some resentment in their heart. So we should learn from that, and we should not make the same mistakes. Again, it's a systemic solution. It's not just, okay, there is this article, what to do. There is this YouTube video, what to do. That's one level, but we should see the whole history. We should see the whole performance of the movement. Does it help? Yes. Thank you. So we have, I should try to keep the answer short.
Hare Krishna,
But
Kaunteya
sometimes
Prabhu.
the answers need to be a little bit elaborated because these are complex issues.
In your class, you mentioned about rather than framing it as a debate, framing as a dialogue when there are these sort of different points of view or perspectives. So everybody comes into a dialogue with different personalities, and it seems like a very delicate ecosystem to maintain that tone of dialogue rather than debate. So if you have even like a few quick tips on how to, I guess, in a detached way, facilitate those kinds of healthy discussions.
Look, what I'll do is to share a document. I put it already on a pen drive. I don't know if anybody can copy somewhere. It's a file entitled Team Learning. And it's about 20 pages. So this is an extract. It's a chapter from a book. And this talks about the team learning and the importance of approaching the issues as a dialogue. I would say just one quick tip, which maybe is not even not in the book, but our philosophy teaches us to be humble. When Krishna lists the 20 items of knowledge, the first thing is humility, amanitvam. So that's really the first portal for knowledge. If we already think we know everything, why we should be humble? But we need to remember we do have some prejudice, we do have some preconceived ideas, we do have some baggage, psychological, cultural baggage. So definitely our senses are imperfect and so on, so many other limitations. So we should approach dialogue not as a teacher, as a master, but as a servant. Trinada pisoni chanata rorivasa ishnuna amanina manadin kirtaniya sadahari. So similarly, we should not think, I know everything, I understand everything. We should say, well, I do have an opinion because I read this, I heard that. My spiritual master said that, and I read that book saying that, and my friends think like that. So that exists, but let's put it on the table, and again, in a vulnerable way. Like present it, not present it, this is the conclusion, but look, this is what my understanding is. Please share your views. And then see if you take this, oh, I thought it was on the... Oh, I thought I was putting this on the... Anyway, I'll give you the file. So there it's explain how we need to come to a dialogue, and then at one point we'll have to shift to take a decision, but will have to be done after we have a very good dialogue. So one tip, let's be humble, let's approach the dialogue with this idea that we may not have perfect understanding because we are conditioned. So let's have a cordial exchange of views, open to learn from others and open to be corrected. That would be my single tip at this stage. Yes, we have, she was next.
About female Diksha Guru topic.
Huh.
I personally, I don't pay much attention on the topic.
But you want to ask the question.
No, but I'm asking because last year, TSI, the Sangha initiative, it's our youth.
TSI?
TSI. It's called the Sangha initiative. So we hosted the TSI seminar here, the weekend retreat. So I was one of the presenters, and I had a session with the women separately and the men separately. So at the end, some young women came, and it was very disturbing for them because...
What was disturbing?
It's disturbing for them to see that senior gurus and Vaishnavas have such strong opposition to this idea of having a female Diksha Guru. And their point is, our history has shown that male Diksha Guru have abused, but their position to, just because some individuals have, wronged, they haven't stopped making male sannyasis like gurus. So on what basis are they saying? Because in our sampradaya, there are female Diksha Gurus. So, and in modern context, for young women, it's very discouraging because it's a culture where women are encouraged, and they feel that then ISKCON is almost unrelatable if they have these ancient old arguments. I know I have your book you gifted me. How would you have answered something like this?
See, as you said, there is a book available. Did Srila Prabhupada want women Diksha Gurus? You have this book. Achha. Okay, so as far as the topic, historically, theologically, in terms of what Srila Prabhupada said, I invite those who are interested to read. Now, in terms of how senior people feel, I can tell you this. Of course, I'm not at liberty to share names and details, but I'm part of these discussions. I attend the GBC meetings, and I was there when, in several years, these things have been discussed, even last February. I don't see that there is, like you presented, that they say that some senior gurus are very much against. I see that, again, without mentioning any names or any specific statement, I see that there are, among senior leaders at this end of the spectrum, people who are totally eager to have women initiating. They are completely convinced that's bona fide and they have no problem. In fact, they would like to promote it. Then at the other end of the spectrum, I don't see really anybody who is totally against. I see that some have some concerns, questions, like, okay, Srila Prabhupada didn't do it, so before doing it, we need to be very careful that it's the right thing to do. We shouldn't jump. Others says that, okay, we could do it, but we should have the right motivation. It's not just because, say, Westerners, they don't like it. I mean, Westerners, they would like us to have women Diksha Guru, therefore we have to have women Diksha Guru. In other words, we should not be swayed by public opinion. Others have more questions like, or some of the same people may say that, look, what does it mean varnashram? Or what kind of varnashram we should establish, and how in this varnashram, this role of women, role of spiritual leadership of women, Diksha Guru for women, how does it work? So they want to take, like we mentioned, time. Let's discuss, go deeper. They don't want to be forced. I don't see anyone, I mean, I'm scanning in my mind the room, I don't see anyone who says, no, never, on my dead body. Nobody says like that. There are also other social means internal issues that some parts of the world or some individuals, let's say some individuals outside the GBC, they are dead against the idea. Now, again, without mentioning any names. And some of these people, they do have kind of threaten some consequences if this goes through. So in other words, some people may be, some leaders may be favorable towards the idea, but they also consider that we should also consider the unity of the movement if this becomes a schism or becomes some sort of, and the dialogue is going on. Some of these leaders are already planning to have a few days of discussions in October, Jane. So I would say, as an insider, there's nobody in that room who is really no. Nobody's like that.
I think that perception, at least these girls, they were in Houston, where our any North America GBC meeting happened. So what happened was there was a group of devotees who were for Diksha Guru, female Diksha Guru. They did their presentation, and there was, I'll not mention name, and there was this one sannyasi who I personally know very well. He had to read because the person who was on the other side was not there to do the presentation because of his health reasons. So when that was read, And the names were, few sannyasis' names were mentioned who were supporting the idea. Unfortunately, the younger generation heard it, and that's how they're seeing it. As if these gurus have a very strong, because the way they were presenting it, it came across like that.
They are strong in not taking rush decisions. On that, they are strong. That they are strong. But they expressed in writing and in words that they're open to the idea. It's just that they need to, certain questions, certain cautionary elements need to be satisfied. Now, it's 8:30. I'm not in no hurry to finish, but I was given up to 8:30. So should I finish officially? There are more questions. I saw at least 2 more hands. Who would like to ask questions? 1, 2.
Yeah.
So you tell me what to do.
No, they can ask question, and if somebody has early morning service and they have to leave, they can leave.
Okay, so please feel free. Of course, you were free throughout the presentation.
Yeah, some of them
but
have
feel
deity worship.
especially free to go if you have to. Thank you for being here and listening. Would have been nice to do something practical, meaning practice with certain guidelines, which we do at the GBC College. We take a topic, we ask different groups to discuss it with certain guidelines. That makes the presentation more alive. This was the theoretical part.
Yeah, regarding to what...
Oh, you got the mic again.
Again, yes, sir.
But there were other before you. Anyway.
Regarding to what Mangi Ji said, yes, there's in the movement, the liberation on how the women have a stronger role into the Diksha and stuff. But outside, there's a collective eager to have women role stronger. Women are fighting for their rights and equality and things that are potentially part of our community. And sometimes they get discouraged when they hear the scriptures.
What's your question?
That the thing is that we're discussing among ourselves, the directors, but outside there's a community eager to get in, but they get discouraged how they, or you guys in the directives, in the authorities, still deliberating about this when the world is going in another direction, is my question.
Yeah, it can be frustrating, of course. It can be frustrating when things that we would like to see happening that don't happen. It's at the same time, I do respect the caution of people that they don't want just to be pushed around. You know, like veganism, you know. There are many vegans, they say why you should drink milk and this and that. They have their own arguments. So we're not going just to say, okay, there's so many vegans, okay, let's stop drinking milk because the vegans don't like that we drink milk. So obviously, Srila Prabhupada was certainly like this. He wasn't about to be pushed around by people's opinions. So again, these leaders, they want to be sure to make a decision. Hare Krishna. So some of these leaders, they want to be sure that to make a decision that will please Srila Prabhupada, that will have a positive outcome. And I tell you, in the religious world, somehow many groups are discussing the same thing. Last year I was in Washington, D.C. I went to see the Seventh-day Adventists, which is the 8th largest Christian denomination in the world. And they also had a huge discussion, should women be ordained or not? and ordained as priests. And there was a lot of discussion. They gave me one internal magazine, which is just for the elders, it's not for publics. And in the magazine there was an article that basically saying similar thing. We should discuss these issues without personal attacks. We should discuss, in a peaceful frame of mind. Later on, they made a decision, and that women cannot become priests. And some people were not happy, but they made that decision. But there are other churches in the world that they're struggling with these issues, the role of women, because they have certain tradition, and the world is changing, and they are discussing how to change with the world. And it's also a fact that these GBCs are very busy doing all sorts of preaching. They don't have like a council of Trent that they just sit there for months or weeks and years. No, they discuss a few days at a time. So it looks like years from outside. Looks like years, but actually was only a few days. You know what I mean? So it looks like, 5 years, 10 years. But actually, if you take 2 years, 2 days in 1 year, 3 days in another year, 1 day another year, they only discuss 7, 8 days. So it's like that. But I understand that some people can be frustrated because there is no conclusion. My personal feeling is that there will be women Diksha Gurus. I don't see any doubt that we will not have women Diksha Gurus. But again, some cautionary considerations needs to be addressed. Yes.
Hare Krishna. It was mentioned before that the whole problem of this world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts. So my question is, I put devotees to a list of wiser people, and should devotees to cultivate to be more certain, like part of character, or just to be it's all illusion, it's all doesn't matter, maybe, yeah, that.
Yeah, we should become certain in certain things. Like Lord Krishna says that those who have doubts, they cannot really advance. So we should be certain in certain things. Again, principles, theological ideas, philosophical truths. At the same time, how those are applied in the day-to-day life sometimes needs a little adjustment or needs a little discussion. And to be approaching issues with certainty sometimes is counterproductive, because sometimes even Srila Prabhupada himself did different things. I was reading a couple of days ago a letter in the 70s. Srila Prabhupada was pushing very much book distribution in America, but in India he was saying, see, the Indian mentality is they don't like to pay for a book, so better to do the life members. So you ask 1,000 rupees at the time, and you give the books for free. So he was certainly very eager to see people having the books, but in America he was teaching how the devotees to sell the books, but in India was say don't sell the books like books, but make the whole package, make people life members, and then you give the books. So I'm just saying, so in that case, we go somewhere in Africa, we should not just be certain, we should do distribution like this. We don't know. I mean, we don't know. We have to see. Do the people read books? Maybe if people don't read books, in some parts of Africa, there may be literacy issues. So instead of giving books, we can give recorded readings. I'm just saying, so if we go just with a certain thing, no, the books have to be distributed, and then you give the books and people don't read the books. Like in Togo, in West Africa, some people really don't read the books, so devotees were giving the books. They got a shipment of books from France, and they were giving quite liberally out, but then they found out that people couldn't read the books. They just couldn't read the books, and they were using the papers to wrap vegetables and fruits in the market. So then obviously that strategy wasn't too successful. So again, on certain things, yeah, ideally we should become certain, not in a forced way, oh, should be certain, because that's like not mature, but yes, on certain thing, the soul, Krishna, the spiritual world, we shouldn't be full of doubts, ideally. We should study, come to some strong conclusions. But in terms of practical application, social interaction, or strategies of propagation, those are changed all the time. Like we don't know what Srila Prabhupada would do with the internet. There was no internet. So we cannot be sure 100%. We can be quite sure, understanding in general Srila Prabhupada mood, that he will do the best use of the internet. But we cannot be certain 100%, because we've never seen Srila Prabhupada dealing with the internet. Or so like that. When we talk about strategies and practical decisions, we need to be open. Okay, does it help? Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to yourself and all the devotees that always make the movement move, make it work. One senior devotee, I felt a little anxiety at one point, and I talked to one senior devotee, and I came to him for help, and I said, what is this movement, you know? What are we supposed to be doing? And he says, chanting, dancing, and feasting. And that gave me a lot of remedy.
Okay.
When he said that. Because he even though he gave a simple answer, it wasn't so simple. It was really the answer, you know, chanting, dancing, and feasting. That's what we're really about. You know? The other things, book distribution, everything is there. But if we go too far into politics and policies and things of that nature, then that anxiety comes upon us. So for me, it's just been really helpful to just keep my mind focused on doing some regular service, and then focus on chanting, dancing, and feasting, and trying to stay out of trouble, you know.
If that works for you. I just wanted to show one slide, sorry. In conclusion, I just wanted to show this slide, which was there at the beginning, but some of you may not have been there at the beginning. Anyway. Basically, it's a quote. Srila Prabhupada says, now we have, by Krishna's grace, built up something significant in the shape of this ISKCON, and we are all one family. Sometimes there may be disagreement and quarrel, but we should not go away. These inebrities can be adjusted by the cooperative spirit, tolerance, and maturity. So I like to finish with these words, Srila Prabhupada. So this, he calls them inebrities. Inebrities meaning these disturbances, these tensions. Okay. Anyway, you can see that. So these inebrities can be adjusted by the cooperative spirit, tolerance, and maturity, like that. So there's no quick fix. It just we need to become a little bit more sattvic, a little bit more patient, a little bit more conscious, respectful, cooperative spirit. We are in this together. Let's not spoil relations. So, thank you very much. Have a good evening, good night. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi. And should I give the file to you? You can open copy. I wanted to give you that team learning file. Ideally, if it can be circulated among the devotees who are interested. It's called Team Learning. It's a Word document.